Exercise 20-21, we're going to prepare our first production cost report. So Color Explosion prepares and packages paint products. Color Explosion has two departments, blending, and in this problem we're going to be doing the blending department, and then packaging. Direct materials are added at the beginning of the blending process, dyes, and at the end of the packaging process, which is cans. So they're going to make some paints, add some dyes in the blending department, and in the next department, the packaging department, they add the cans at the end of the process. Conversion costs are added evenly throughout each process. The company uses the weighted average method. Data from the month ended from the month of May for the blending department are as follows. So we're going to create a production cost report. So this is from our slides, and there's 4 steps. We're going to summarize a flow of physical units, which is right here. So we have to figure out how many units were in process and then started in process, and then how many were transferred out and how many were left in the process that were incomplete. So over here it says, now remember this window is for just the blending department, and that's what we're doing here. We're just doing the blending department. So the beginning work in process in units, there were 0 gallons in process at the beginning of the period. So what I'm going to do here is I've created some T accounts showing you the process. So again, there's two processes in this company. There's the blending and packaging. And for this problem, we're only doing the blending department. So materials, raw materials like paint, whatever the ingredients are for paint, dyes, I guess, come from the raw materials. They start in the blending process, and when they're done blending, they go to the packaging process. So again, this problem, we're only doing the blending process. So according to this, the beginning work in process was 0 gallons. So I've put 0 here, beginning balance in units. Started in production, 85. So the units to account for, and let me show you another screenshot from our video, our PowerPoint. The units to account for are beginning balance and then the units added. And the units accounted for are the ones transferred out and the ones that are still in the ending balance because they're not completed. So these two to account for, beginning plus the additions, have to equal the units transferred out and the units left in the process incomplete. So it says 6,500 gallons were completed and transferred out. So I put those here on the minus side, which means 8,500 plus 0 minus 6,500 means there's 2,000 units ending that are incomplete. And it tells you that here. We didn't even have to do the math for that. So now we're going to put that on our production cost report. So the units to account for, and again, remember this is the blending department, they're the units that are beginning in process, which is 0. Copy and paste the 0. And then they are the units started in production, which, just to give you a visual, it's the 8,500 started in production. Where do we get that 8,500? We got it from here. Copy and paste. So the units to account for are 0 plus 8,500. I can do the math in my head. 8,500 to account for. So the units accounted for are the units that are leaving, the units that left plus the units that are still in the process. So they both have to equal 8,500. So the units transferred out are 6,500, completed and transferred out, and then the units still in the ending work in process because they're incomplete, there's 2,000 of them. Ending work in process. So the total units accounted for are 6,500 plus 2,000 is the same as the 8,500. So this is one way to double check your work. The units to account for and the units accounted for have to be the same. Now, let's talk about the units completed and transferred out. We need to find the equivalent units for direct materials. Well, since these were transferred out, they were 100% complete, so that's the equivalent of 100% units for direct materials and 100% materials for conversion costs. Now let's do the equivalent units for the ending work in process. So here's the key. Ending work in process is 30% of the way through the blending process. And for this process, direct materials are added at the beginning of the blending process. So remember, we're doing the blending process. So here's a slide that I've modified for this problem. So here's the process, here's the beginning, here's the end. Direct materials are added at the beginning, and these 2,000 units, which I get from right here in the ending work in process. So these are the ones that are unfinished. Those are 30% of the way through according to this. So we have to figure out how many of these 2,000 units, 2,000 gallons, units, gallons, whatever you want to call them, same thing, have the direct materials. Direct materials are added at the beginning, so it's 100% of them. So I'm going to copy and paste that. So for direct materials, they all have the direct materials added to them. And then for conversion costs, remember it says up here, conversion costs are added evenly throughout the process. And we are 30% of the way through the process for these 2,000 units. So we're going to take 30% right here. We're going to take 2,000 that are in the ending work in process. So this 2,000 times 30% gives us 600. Equivalent units. So then to get the total units accounted for, we're going to take 6,500 plus 2,000 gives us 8,500. And then 6,500 plus 600 gives us 7,100. So now we've done the first two steps. We've summarized the flow of physical units, and then we've computed the equivalent units of production. So again, this slide is from our PowerPoint and from a previous video. Next step, compute the cost per equivalent unit of production. So up here, we figured out the units. Now we're going to figure out the costs. So the first step we have to do, cost to account for, is the beginning work in process, and then the costs added during the period. So we're going to consult our cost section of the table over here. Beginning work in process, dollar-wise, is 0. And that makes sense because, let me scroll up a little bit. We had beginning work in process units. There were none. There were no units. There were no gallons work in process. So the costs are 0. Next, we've got to fill in the costs for conversion costs and the total costs. Again, this is 0 because for the beginning work in process, we add a 0 there. They're all 0. So now we have to figure out the costs added for the material, or added during the period for direct materials. How much were the costs added during the period? Right here. Direct materials is right here, so 55.25. Now we need conversion costs. So remember, conversion costs is direct labor plus manufacturing overheads. So we're going to take 1,500 plus 25.47 so 1,500, 1,500 plus 25.47 gives us $4,047 of conversion costs to account for. And then the total cost, we're just going to take 5525 plus 4047. So 5525 plus 4047 gives us 9572. So these are the total costs to account for. Now, total costs accounted for. You're just going to take the beginning work in process plus costs added during the period gives us the direct materials of 5525, conversion costs, copy and paste, and then 9572. Again, this is found by calculating or adding the beginning work in process plus the costs added during the period. Next, we need to divide by the total equivalent units of production. So now make sure you get your columns correct. So notice we're on direct materials. So we have to go up here and find the equivalent units of production for direct materials. And here's the direct materials column. So the equivalent units of production is 8,500. So I'm going to take the 8,500, copy, and paste. So the cost per equivalent unit for direct materials, we find that by taking 5525 divided by 8,500. So 5525, 5525 divided by 8,500 gives us 65 cents of direct material per equivalent unit, per finished unit. Now, conversion costs. We need to figure out the total EUP. So for the conversion costs, remember they are up here in this column over here. So I'm going to take this 7,100, copy and paste that down to here. Oops. Copy, paste. So for conversion costs, I'm going to take the 4,047 cost to account for, divide by those 7,100 units. So we get 4047 divided by 7,100 gives us 57 cents per equivalent unit. So conversion costs 57 cents per equivalent unit, and direct materials 65 cents per equivalent unit. And that's just for the blending department. So that does not include the packaging department. All right. So now what we're doing is we're doing the last section, the costs accounted for. So we're going to assign costs to completed units and the units in process. So really what we're trying to do here is figure out of the units that were transferred out, how much were their costs? And for the units that are still in the department because they are 30% complete, how much costs are assigned to those? So that's really what we're doing here. So the way we do that is we're going to calculate the costs accounted for the units completed and transferred out, and then the ending work in process units. So first of all, we're going to calculate the direct materials costs for the completed and transferred out units. To do that, we have to figure out the equivalent units for direct materials. And those are the ones for that were completed and transferred out. So direct materials completed and transferred out are 6,500. So we're going to take 6,500 times this 65 cents. So 6,500 equivalent units times 0.65 equals 4,225. Next, we have to figure out the conversion costs. So remember, this is for completed and transferred out. So we're going to go back up here. So for conversion costs, for the ones completed and transferred out, there's still 6,500 equivalent units. So we're going to take 6,500 times the conversion cost of 57. So 6,500 times 0.57 equals 3705. And then the total costs, you're going to take 4225 plus 3705. So 4225 plus 3705 gives us 7930. So the units that were completed and transferred out, their total costs are $7,930. Now, so again, that's for the 6,500 units transferred out. Now we have to figure out how much the costs are for the 2,000 units that are 30% complete. So for the ending work in process, we're going to take the 65 cents. Now remember, this is direct materials we're working on for ending work in process. So 65 cents times the equivalent units. And the equivalent units for, here's the equivalent units for direct materials, it's 2,000 units. So we're going to take 2,000 units times this 0.65, and that gives us $1,300. And then here's one that people get tripped up on. So for the conversion cost for the ending work in process, we're going to take 0.57, so 57 cents, times the equivalent units for the conversion costs. So here's the conversion cost equivalent units, 600. So we're going to take 600 equivalent units times 0.57. 600 times 0.57 is $342. So for the 2,000 units that are still, so these 2,000 units are in the ending balance that are 30% complete. Their total costs are $1,300 of direct materials plus $342 of conversion costs. So we're going to add this plus this, and that gives us what, $1,642? Okay. Now, the last thing we need to do is to calculate the total costs accounted for. So for direct materials, we're going to take 4225 plus 1,300, and that gives us, what is that, 5525. For the conversion costs, we're going to take 3705 plus 342, and that gives us 4047. And then for this number, there's two ways to calculate. Take this number plus this number, so clear 7930 plus the 1642 gives us 9572. The other way to double check your work is this number should be these two numbers added together. So let's do that. So we're going to take 5525 plus 4047, 4047 gives us this 9572. So one final check. The total costs accounted for, or excuse me, the total cost to account for this 9572 must equal the total costs accounted for, 9572. Just like the total units to account for, 8,500, must equal the total units accounted for, 8,500. Awesome. So what these numbers here are saying is we did all that work to calculate that these 6,500 units that were transferred out, they cost $79.30 to make so far. Remember, this is only the blending department. And for the 2,000 units left in the blending department, their costs so far are $16.42. So this $16.42 is attached to these 2,000 units, and the $79.30 cost is attached to these units. And that's it.